Okay, well, good evening, folks. This is Dr. Jennifer Peluso. It's Tuesday, November 15th at 7:30 p.m. Welcome to another installment of Psych 710, Cognitive and Affective Bases of Behavior. I am very pleased that we have been joined by my colleague, Dr. Andrew Kirschner. He is our writer extraordinaire, and he oversees our graduate online writing studio. I've asked him to come and talk with us this evening about writing, and in particular, taking your writing up to the professional notch that we would like it to be. And we know it can get there, particularly with the writing studio's help. So I am going to pass the baton to Dr. Kirschner and let him take it from here. Dr. Kirschner.
All right, I've got the baton. Thank you, Dr. Peluso. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your students. Welcome, students. As Dr. Peluso mentioned, my name is Dr. Kirschner. I am the chair of the Kaiser University Graduate Online Writing Studio. Tonight, I am going to talk to you about the purpose of the Writing Studio, how to use it, the benefits of using it, and give you some instruction on how to improve your writing skills. So first, let's talk about what the purpose of the Writing Studio is. Many of you have probably been out of school for some period of time. If you're getting a master's or PhD in graduate school, many students have been out 5, 10, 20 years. And so it's very normal for students to forget how to write and read effectively and how to use how to apply all of the requirements of the APA manual. So our purpose is really threefold. It is to, one, help you maximize your experience in graduate school, and I want all of you to see using the Writing Studio as part and parcel of that experience. Two, it's to help you to improve your reading, writing, critical thinking, researching skills, and three, and I think we are pretty good at doing this, it's to lift your morale. It can be overwhelming, stressful when you are balancing your job and your family life to take courses. It's the reason why only a very small fraction of students pursue a graduate degree, because it's not easy and it requires a lot of sacrifice. So to have us as an extra set of eyes to help lift you up and improve your performance can be a real morale booster. All right, here's a look at our website. If you are interested in visiting it and taking a look at some of the resources we provide our students in addition to the writing services, I strongly encourage you to do that. You can our website's URL is sort of long, so I just encourage students to Google Kaiser University Graduate Online Writing Studio or some variation of that, abbreviated version of that. It'll pop right up and you'll see it there, and you'll see all the services that we offer, including short video tutorials and a lot of advice from the APA manual that we've put in layperson's terms so that you can better understand how to organize your work and make an outline and cite your sources and do a whole lot more. So I invite you to visit our website at your leisure. All right, next, how do you use it? And I'm just going to spend a few minutes going over this introduction to the studio, and then I'm going to get into strategies to really help you improve your writing, so bear with me. So you basically have three options when you decide that you're ready to use the Writing Studio, and the good news is that it's fast, it's easy, and many of our students use it every week for the entire term of their earning their degree. So we have an email address that is very easy to remember. It's simply writingstudio@kaiseruniversity.edu. So regardless of how you decide to use us, whether you want a written consultation, in other words, you're going to email your paper to us, we're going to write all over it and give you our advice and return it to you via email. Or if you want to exercise one of the other options, which is a phone conversation, if you prefer just to talk to us, send it to us and talk to us about your paper, or a Skype consultation if you prefer the face-to-face contact. However you decide to do that, that's how you reach us, writingstudio@kaiseruniversity.edu. And on our website and probably in your course with Dr. Peluso, you'll find something called a writing consultation form. And this form takes anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds to complete. It just asks your name and phone number and email address so we can track your information and know where you're coming from, the department you're in. You'd be psychology. And then, most importantly, it just asks you to copy and paste your assignment and rubric for either the discussion post or the weekly assignment that you're asking us to review. And it's real important that we have that so that we have a foundation of knowledge on which we can provide feedback to you. If we don't know the assignment, it'd be difficult for us to tell you if you're heading in the right direction. Of course, we can correct your grammar and give you other APA-related advice, but we want to give you a full service, the full car wash. All right, let's see what's next. So, benefits of using the Writing Studio. We talked about a little of this already. I'll let you read through that. But at the end of this presentation, I'll show you some results from our surveys that I think will motivate you to get in there and use our services, hopefully on a regular basis. Of course, it's free, so no harm in at least trying it out. All right, we made it, and I did that in under 5 minutes. So this is where I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation is discussing these topics with you, these 8 topics that you see here. And you say, well, how did I come up with that list? I have been working in and out of our writing studio for the past 8 years. So I have had interactions with hundreds and hundreds, I don't know, maybe it's even more by now, of students in our criminal justice, MBA, nursing, psychology, education, occupational therapy, and many more programs. I've gotten to know them pretty well. I know our population. And so I did my best to identify the areas where I find students most commonly struggle. This is not an all-inclusive list. It is just a list of areas where I believe students could benefit from some additional instruction. So I am going to make my way through this list with you, and hopefully you find it useful. All right, here we go, off to the races. Writing an introduction. So the first thing I want to do is I want to assuage your fears. The first, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, I say it kiddingly, the first step to improving your skills as a writer is to admit you have a problem. And I can tell you that when I was a middle school student, I used to read. The teacher would assign a book, and I'd go home and read it. And I would get so frustrated because I had never been equipped with reading strategies. I didn't know to reread for comprehension, to take notes, to highlight, to think critically about what I was reading, to look at headings, to make predictions. I didn't have all those strategies. So I would go home, I'd read, and I wouldn't remember anything I read. I'd get into class, and the teacher would ask me to tell her about a character's flaw in the book. And I wouldn't have an answer, and she'd say, "Why did you read?" And I said, "I read, I just can't remember it." Well, I'm going to lift your spirits and let you know I grew up to be a high school English teacher, a reading coach for the Florida Department of Education, and the chair of a university writing center. So anything is possible, and I struggled in other areas in English as well. So I want you to believe in your ability to improve your writing, reading, researching, critical thinking, and APA skill set. You can do it. You just have to be determined, and you have to carve out some time every week. I tell students, even if you can carve out 5, 10, 20 minutes a week to spend on our website and the APA manual or just learning some general rules, it will serve you well. And not just in your academic career, but also in your professional career. Because regardless of your profession, it doesn't matter if you're an auto mechanic or a scientist or a psychologist, you're going to be communicating with stakeholders or clients. And the reality is that people will judge you based on how you write. And the truth of the matter is that, they probably won't ask you who fought in the Civil War. If you think the East fought the West, they probably will never know that you don't know it was the North and the South. And if you forgot how to operate a Bunsen burner, probably won't have to know that either unless you're in that profession. But if there's one thing that's universal in business, it tends to be writing. And so it's really a good investment of time. And I know it's not everybody's favorite thing to do, but here's how you write an introduction. Here are the steps, the 3 steps to writing an introduction. I think what I see more than anything else, and it depends on the type of the piece of writing that you're doing. You know, you may remember from middle school or high school starting out with a hook and a startling statistic, a quotation, a fact, something to engage your reader, and that's fine. You know, you definitely want to consider your reader as you write. But here are I'll let you read through these, but here are, you know, the general steps to writing an introduction. And, you know, you can Google, how do I write an APA compliant introduction? How do I write an introduction in graduate school? Or you can look on our website and look at examples and try to internalize that process. You know, identifying a main idea that you're going to write about, explaining why it's important, making sure you end the introduction with your thesis statement, and that is, you know, what it is that you know, you're going to prove or discuss, the heart of your paper. So this is a process. You know, it's not something that you just learn on a whim, and it's not an exact science either. No 2 introductions are alike, but some introductions that I read tend to be a bit rudderless, or they contain either supporting details or superfluous information that just makes it hard to navigate through. So you really want your introduction to be organized. In order to organize it, you have to know the pieces of the puzzle that will complete it. And so there's a list, and I hope that you find that useful. So body paragraphs are probably the area where students struggle the most, much less so than introductions and conclusions, because those are pretty self-evident. In body paragraphs, I often see students make 2 mistakes more than any others. And the first mistake I see is students start off their body paragraphs, that is, everything between their introduction and conclusion. I see them start the paragraphs off with supporting details, and then supporting details that aren't related to those supporting details. Or the other mistake I see in body paragraphs is that either one paragraph really should be 2 separate paragraphs, or vice versa. So body paragraphs, the formula is super easy to understand and to remember. You're starting out with a topic sentence. That's a broad statement of what your paragraph's going to be about, and then you can expound on that with a second supporting sentence that drills down a little bit more. But the heart of your body paragraph is going to be your supporting details, and sort of look at your topic sentence as the umbrella, and your supporting details are all the people standing under the umbrella, and all of those people look differently. They come from different places, but they all relate to the umbrella. And then that body paragraph ends with a wrap-up sentence that summarizes your body paragraph in a creative way. It's not a verbatim restatement of the topic sentence. It's written in a creative way, but it's still germane to your content of that paragraph. It's still related to it. All right, so I included a little chart there. Again, you can Google these on your own. And it's a good idea to triangulate your exposure to these lessons and not just take it from me, but Google them and read your APA manual. One of the greatest gifts my father ever gave me was my freshman year of college, as I went off to Washington, D.C. on my own, and he gave me his college copy of Strunk and White's Elements of Style. And that was back in the, I guess, 40s, 50s. That was the earlier version of today's APA manual, and it became my writing Bible and served me well. So I encourage you to open yourself up to the idea of being a student of the writing process and learning how to improve. All right, writing a conclusion. Probably the most common mistake that I see in conclusions that has me scratching my head is all of a sudden I see new information. And by new information, I mean information that I never heard anything about in the introduction or body paragraphs. So that's a big no-no. In your conclusion, you are not writing a new story. You are summarizing the story that you've just written, and by story I mean research paper. You are summarizing your paper in a creative way. You're not simply restating your introduction verbatim. And you might also give your reader something to think about. Is there additional research that could be done on this topic? So I'll let you read through that description that I've posted here. When I make presentations, I don't like to read off PowerPoints because that can be a little bit disengaging. So I'll let you read through that. And again, we have samples on our website. You can Google sample APA compliant paper, and you'll get PDFs and PDFs worth of papers, and you can read the conclusions to get some idea of the formula. So just make sure that you're, that you're staying on topic, and that you, that you engage. Your conclusion, it's like the end of a speech. It's an opportunity to really show that you understand the most salient points from the paper, the main idea, that you can summarize them in your own words, and that you can leave the reader wanting to investigate the topic further, maybe find additional gaps in the literature, and so on. And I should say I'll leave this point for a slide in the future. All right. So if you asked me to name my favorite slide, this would be it. I had a meeting with our most incredible dean last week, Dr. Jones, and we were talking about evidence of learning, and he said, yep, it's right at the top of my list too. And it's always at the top of my list. It's, if I could give students one piece of advice, it wouldn't even be close. This one would be at the top, and you'd have to fall off a cliff and hit the ground before you get to the next one. I mean, nothing compares. Because this is what graduate education is all about. So the common mistake that I see as it relates to evidence of learning when I read papers is I see so much common knowledge, so much information that I know that a psychology student already knows, or an education student, criminal justice student, etc. And sometimes it's even cited. I'll just give you an easy example in the field of education. I see papers where it asks, a prompt might ask students to talk about current trends in education. And a student will write, many students feel anxiety over the amount of pressure that's placed on them by state testing requirements. Johnson, 2015. Or many teachers report that they leave the profession because they're asked to do too much for too little salary, too little pay, compensation. Davis, 2016. Well, my goodness, this is what we call trite information. That is not scholarly work. That is information that if you are a K-12 or higher education educator, you already know that. The purpose of, and that shows me that the student just isn't thinking. The purpose of graduate education is to broaden and deepen your body of knowledge, so that you can become a more effective and a skilled professional. And so when you read peer-reviewed journal articles, studies, your textbook, etc., you want to weed all of that out. You want to read that and say, that's not good enough. That's not what my professor's looking for. My professor wants me to show evidence of learning, to find a study that has a unique set of findings that challenge the status quo. And then after I cite those, after I summarize them in my own words, to even challenge those myself and to analyze them and maybe present a contrarian point of view and really show that I'm thinking outside of the box, or even discuss how these new and exciting findings, how I might apply them in my current or future position, and how that may make me a better professional. So this is what graduate education is all about. And so when you go through this process of extracting information from all of these sources, really try to think about what it is that you are extracting so that you make sure that it is worthwhile. And that's a good segue to critical thinking, because it's really very similar. When you read a study, a psychologist at UCLA who conducted a study of 158 participants in 2014, found, well, as I'm sure Dr. Peluso often teaches you, simply because somebody conducted a study doesn't mean that it is etched in granite. You have the right, and you are, of course, encouraged to think critically about that study, to analyze the findings, to look beyond the stated threats to validity and the weaknesses of the evidence, and to draw your own conclusions. This is what critical thinking is all about. You may remember in school when you received a piece of literature and you were asked to draw inferences. So there was some evidence there, but you had to reach your own conclusion or identify an author's point of view or compare and contrast or to find a cause-effect relationship. This doesn't change in graduate school. To the contrary, you should accelerate this focus on this skill set. So just make sure, my advice to you is, when you're writing, don't go through the motions. Really pause and think about what you're doing, and think about how you can maximize your experience. And most of all, think about your reader. When you write, you should always be thinking about your reader. What is my reader, in this case your professor, going to think when she is reading my work? All right, next slide, citing references. Well, I see all kinds of stuff when I look at citations. Probably the most common mistake I see with references is the tense. References are written in the past tense per APA. So the researcher found, the researcher concluded, as opposed to the present tense. I also see a lot of first person. I see the passive voice. The study was conducted. I always say to the student, well, who conducted the study? Get rid of that linking verb. Is, are, was, were, all those linking verbs. Use a subject and an action verb. The researcher found, ... Jones, 2014 in parentheses. Or if it is multiple authors, an ampersand, which is the and sign between the authors. Ampersands always used in parentheses, never outside of parentheses. So I also see a lot of errant commas. You see the examples I have there of where there is a comma and where there isn't. So this is all nitpicky stuff. So you might say, why does it matter? I'm just going to get nicked off a point or two for missing it. Yep, you're right. Let me tell you why it matters, though. It matters because after you've taken a few classes, if you're a newbie, we expect you to make these mistakes. But after you've taken a few classes, you should have internalized this stuff. You're super smart. Make a cheat sheet if you have to, if you can't remember it. But the message it sends to your professor, and I am known for many things, and one of them is my candor. So I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. When you have a paper filled with these mistakes, errant commas, and sometimes I even see two periods in one sentence, one after the quotation ends and then one after the parentheses, that really gets me scratching my head. Because after you've taken a few classes, there is an expectation that you've internalized this. So when you're or that you check your citations, when your professor is reading your work, the last thing you want to do is get him or her tripped up with these easy-to-fix errors in citations. So it really does behoove you, in order to keep them in a good frame of mind and to follow APA rules as you're required as a graduate student, to learn these rules. And so we have a bunch of examples on our website. There's more in your APA manual. And again, I really challenge you to embrace your APA manual. It gets a really bad rap, and I think it's because some of it is intimidating. However, there are some really terrific sections in the APA manual. There's a great one on economy of expression that teaches you how to write concisely, in addition to a lot of run-on sentences and sentence fragments and much more that we see. One of the most common mistakes that I see in the writing studio is just a lot of superfluous language in sentences. So remember that the written word is not the spoken word written down. If you were to transcribe my presentation here, you would get, let's say you got 10,000 words. Now, if you were to put that in, transcribe it and put it in writing, I could whittle it down to half that at least, because I have all kinds of fillers when I'm talking, because I'm trying to be, I'm using a lot of colloquialisms and trying to be friendly and easygoing. So it's very informal when I'm talking to you. But when you're writing, scholarly writing, it's much more concise and formal. So there's a great section, as an example, on writing clearly, writing concisely rather. And so one of the things that I do with students, again, we're not an editing service. We like to just provide sample revisions, and then you go fix it in the rest of your paper. But one of the things I like to do with students is I'll find a sentence that's 30 words long, and I will revise that sentence into a 15-word sentence. And I will say to the student, look, I just cut your 30-word sentence down by 50%, and I communicated exactly the same content. Now you can turn your 10-page paper into a 5-page paper if you decide you want to go through that exercise. And I would ask you, if you had the option to read a 300-page book and you could read it in 150 pages and read the same story about Harry Potter, which one would you choose? Obviously, the latter. So try to work on that and spend some time with that APA manual. If you don't understand something, go on to the next section and focus first on what it is that you can take away from it. All right, moving right along. Summarizing and analyzing. So this is a really, really tough one because it's such an inexact science, but I do hear a lot, we hear, I should say, there are multiple writing consultants in the writing studio. We do hear a lot from students that they have a lot of difficulty figuring out what they should summarize, what is the main idea of an article. And there is no silver bullet for that. It really is just something that you have to practice. But when it comes to summarizing and analyzing, that's something that we work with. I can't give you that answer tonight. It's something that we work with students on in the writing studio. We look at your reference section and we will go find the article and we will make a determination if you have summarized information that is the most important from an article. And what usually causes us to do that is we look at the title of an article in your reference section, and it is very intriguing and seems to contain some significant information, and then we look at the one citation you've extracted from it, and it just doesn't seem to measure up to the title. It's like the title would be, aliens found, alien remains found on Earth, and then the citation in the paper talks about something much less significant. So this is a skill that takes time to develop, and we can help you with that as we can with analyzing. And I talked a little bit about that before, how to analyze a piece of work, and you can read more about that on our website. But I really want to spend a little time on this slide on organization because it's so important. And I know I keep saying all of these are so important, but they are important. So you have a few choices when it comes to organization, and I'll talk to you about them in a minute, but let me tell you what happens with a lot of students. Students sit down to write, and they just start writing, and then it becomes a jungle, and they need a tour guide to get them out of the jungle because there's like no looking back. And so I don't suggest you do that. We have some great models on our website on how to write an outline, which I suggest. But if you're not in the mood to write an outline, I strongly urge you to use all 5 levels of the APA section headings. If your paper's long, if it's not, you can use a level 1, level 2 heading. You can find those on our website and in the APA manual. So what do you do with those headings, and how can they help you organize your work? Before you even start writing your paper, look at the rubric. And the rubric contains, let's say the rubric's worth 100 points, and let's just say for argument's sake 20 points of it is writing, right? So set that aside because that's not going to be, writing compliance is not going to be a heading. So let's say you've got 80 points of content, and you got 4 sections, each are worth 20 points. All right, you've got your headings. Now, don't make the mistake of copying, unless you've been directed otherwise and told to have a results section and a methodology, unless it's that kind of paper. But if it's just a basic research paper and you're reading 3 to 5 journal articles and writing a research paper, your headings should generally match, unless you're advised otherwise, should match your professor's rubric. Now, don't just copy and paste each section of the rubric, especially when it's in the form of a question. Showing evidence of critical thinking involves looking at those parts of the rubric and summarizing them in a more concise way so that they best represent what that section is going to be about. If you remember back in elementary school, you may remember that before you would start reading, your teacher probably advised you to look at the pictures in the chapter that started out the chapter. And the purpose of that was those pictures were intended to give you an idea about what you were going to be reading about. And so APA section headings are the graduate school version of pictures. So when I read a heading, I look to it to give me insight into the section I'm about to read. And I look at the subheadings as well to give me that kind of insight, to keep me focused, to remind me what I'm reading about. Now, some headings that I read are so vague that they don't give me that insight. They just say something like fundamentals or problems or foundation. So I don't know what that means. So unless you're writing a dissertation or a paper where you're given a list of headings and it's clear, you want to make sure that your headings are explicit enough so that they provide sufficient insight into a section. This is a reminder to consider your reader as you write and make sure you're guiding your reader. But when your professor grades your work, you want to make sure that you make it easy for your professor to account for all of the parts of the rubric. And think of how pleased your professor will be if you align each APA section heading with all of the different parts of the rubric. So that's a little bit of advice on organization. I hope that you find it useful and that it serves you well. All right, coming down the home stretch. So I simultaneously talked a little bit about the rubric there. So when you submit your work to us, Writing Studio at kaiseruniversity.edu, with your writing consultation form, you will include the rubric. So one of the things that we do in addition to providing you APA-related feedback is we will read your paper and we will give you feedback as to whether or not you satisfy the requirements of the rubric. And I should say, too, this is sort of unrelated, but, we try to balance the amount of feedback that we give you. We don't want to underwhelm you, and we don't want to overwhelm you. So as we get to know different students, we have some students say, just give me your best shot, give me all you got. And then we have others who, we understand sometimes when you get a sea of comments back on a paper, I think it can be overwhelming and just too much of a daunting task and kind of just shut the lights out. So we survey all of our students after we give them feedback, and we follow up with a phone call to check on you to see how we did and how else we can help you. So I think you'll find that in every corner of the university. Hopefully that's been your experience if you've been around for a while, but we really part of our mission statement is putting students first, and it's not it's not just in writing for aesthetic purposes. We actually really pride ourselves on doing that. So that's my 3 cents on using paying attention to the rubric. All right, proofreading. I know it's one of our least favorite things to do. I say that I've had a few root canals in my day, and I joke with students that sometimes it seems like they equate proofreading with a root canal. Well, I get it. Believe me, I was in graduate school taking care of a family and elderly parents and working full time and I understand the sacrifices and the time constraints, and so I get it. When you're done writing a paper, you want to find that drop box and hit submit and just go unwind. it is definitely not easy to find the time. But don't do that. You have already invested so much time in reading and writing and thinking. Now is not the time to give up. Many of our professors, and I can't speak for your professors, but many of our professors will tell students, if you can get it into the writing studio by Sunday night, you'll get it back. We usually return papers within a few hours, but we have a 24-hour guarantee. But you should get it back sometime Monday morning, and that gives you time, maybe Monday when you get home from work, to review it. Spend a half hour or so making some changes, and then submit it Monday night. And many professors will not mark it late because they get copied when we send it to you, and they see that you've used the writing studio, because you did finish it after all on Sunday. You're just going that extra mile. But really spend the time proofreading. They say about writing that it's an iterative process, meaning that you just don't write and submit. When I write something, the first time I write it, when I go back and read it, I say to myself, my goodness, I can't believe how awful this is. I can't believe how many mistakes there are in it, because it's just a thought train. We're just writing away, and we're not really paying attention to errors that we make. So when you see red and blue underlines, those are spelling and grammatical errors, respectively. You need to tend to those. I encourage you to proofread aloud. Have a friend or family member proofread it if they can, or a peer reviewer in your class. But you also need to proofread it. Sometimes I start reading a paper, and the very first word is got an egregious error. It's the word if, and it's missing the I, and it's underlined in red. And that sends a message to your professor that, I wish I had a euphemism for this, but I like to be honest with students. I'll try to phrase it in a positive way. It's not sending a message that you care, and that's not the message you want to send. You want to make sure that you take that final step of pride in your work. And proofreading is really at the heart of that. So I understand that it is not fun, but I highly recommend it, and we can help you with that as well. So another good reason to use our service. All right, here we are, the last slide, number 18. I'll let you read that. Boy, I tell you, one of the most rewarding parts of our wonderful job is speaking to students on the telephone in tears, telling us how they got their first A on a paper, or how they were ready to drop out of school if it wasn't for us helping them. And so every time we hear from a student, our hearts, get beaten, and we just feel terrific for the privilege to be able to help students in an area that can be so stressful, and in an area where it's so easy to make significant gains, and that's what we do. And our hundreds and hundreds of surveys that we receive back from students, and every year, reflect the appreciation that students have for the service. So this is one of these support services, just like your advisor, that you really want to take advantage of. And it doesn't matter what your writing level is. You can be a beginning writer or working at an advanced level. And think of it, even people who publish best-selling books, they use an editor. And it comes back, their manuscripts come back with plenty of corrections. So I strongly encourage you and invite you to use our services. Many students use us weekly. It is a pleasure and honor to serve you. I hope that you have found this presentation instructive and I hope inspiring. And with that, again, my name is Dr. Kirschner. I'm the chair of the Writing Studio. You can reach us at writingstudio@kaiseruniversity.edu. And with that, I turn it back to Dr. Peluso for any closing comments or questions. Dr. Peluso.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirschner. Your passion for graduate education shines right through every slide and every word that you said, and I want to thank you for sharing that inspiration with the students as well as this important information. I just want to say one of the challenges that I think our students struggle with is having the courage to be imperfect. Sometimes they worry that to be scholarly means that from the get-go, the work must meet some expectation that they have of level of vocabulary or no grammatical errors or the like. And I really like that you've emphasized that writing is a process, and we develop and we evolve our voice and our writing style over time. And there's always opportunity to take it up a notch. But I wanted to come back to this issue of vocabulary, if you don't mind, and ask you a question. Sometimes students think that using too simple a language is not scholarly, but sometimes simplest is best, or direct is best. Could you say something about that?
Oh, oh, simplest is best. Students, I want you to think about when you read a journal article or a study, and it's filled with all these highfalutin million-dollar words, right? And you read it and you scratch your head and you say, what the heck did I just read? Well, what good is that? What good is it? Who's getting impressed? You know, there and to a degree, there's going to be some insider jargon, and there's an expectation that you dissect it. But when you write for an audience, do you know most newspapers are written at a 5th grade reading level? So one of the pieces of advice I give you is and I'm glad that you asked this question, Dr. Peluso. One of the mistakes that I often see students make is they will copy and paste a direct quotation from let's say a journal article, and it'll have a lot of fancy words in it, and then it creates what's known as a non sequitur, and I will explain what that means. I read that, and then what follows, it's completely disjointed because I don't think they understood what they copied and pasted. It just had a lot of good-looking words in it. So you want to show your professor that you understand the content, and to do that, summarize it in your own words, and of course, then cite it. And so that's an important step in the learning process. Now, if you're quoting MLK, JFK, or Gandhi, or a mathematical equation, you're not going to rewrite the "I have a dream" speech in your own words. It's just nonsensical. It would really detract from the power of its meaning. But otherwise, generally speaking, there's no reason to use a block quote on an article that's talking about the psychology of depression that you could easily summarize in your own words and still cite. So yes, I'm in complete agreement. Use lay person's terms as often as possible, and it's still academic. You're not going to use slang. It should still be somewhat formal, but you don't have to have million-dollar words. You don't want to use words like things, and you don't want to use dead verbs. You should be using action verbs and descriptive words. So I would say there's a middle ground there, and it's a good it's a good area to focus on.
Wonderful, thank you. One last question for you, Dr. Kirschner. We have some students who really are very talented in their writing, and if these students wanted to learn more about writing to learn or helping students learning how to write, can they volunteer or assist in the writing studio?
That's a good question. I could answer it, but I would rather check with, I have no issue with it. I think, I'm trying to think if we have, I think we maybe used someone years ago in the writing studio, a student, intern, but let me check with Dr. Jones on that, our dean, and I will let you know.
Okay, wonderful. Well, folks, if you are interested in that, come and talk to me, and we'll get you connected and see what we can do. If you can't work formally in the writing studio, perhaps you can work as a peer reviewer in this course or in a course in the future, and put you to work to help for the greater good. Well, with that, Dr. Kirschner, I want to thank you for your time. Wonderful presentation. Keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference in the graduate school, and I know in the individual lives of the students who connect and make use of the services. So thank you very much. And folks, thank you for attending our session. I will turn our recording off momentarily and stay on in case anybody wants to pop in and ask a question. Otherwise, Dr. Kirschner, I wish you a great evening.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.